Hello and welcome to All Indians Matter. I am Ashraf Engineer. Earlier this year, All Indians Matter published a six-part special, Kastur in Gandhi's Shadow, His Guiding Light, on Kasturba, the wife of Mahatma Gandhi. The series of conversations with Tushar Gandhi, peace activist and great-grandson of the Mahatma, traced Kasturba's life from birth till death and sought to showcase her role in India's freedom struggle. Contrary to what most people believe, Kasturba had a real and wide ranging impact on the freedom movement as a true satyagrahi and one of Gandhi's foremost strategists. She led several initiatives within the struggle and was jailed for significant periods of time for it. Shortly after that series, Tushar published his latest book, The Lost Diary of Kastur, My Ba. A couple of years ago, the staff of the Gandhi Research Foundation of Jalgaon found a crumbling, damaged diary at Kasturba Ashram in Indore. It turned out to be a 135-page diary written by Kasturba between January and September 1933. Like Kasturba, the diary lay forgotten and neglected. Tushar's book is a reproduction of the diary, a transcription as well as a translation. I'm very pleased to welcome Tushar once again to the show. Welcome.
Hi, Ashraf. Thank you very much. And hello to all the listeners of All Indians Matter. It's lovely to be back with all of you.
Tushar, the discovery of the diary itself seems to be quite a story. Tell us how it was found and how did you get to know about it?
Ashraf, the Gandhi Research Foundation in Jalgaon has a very scientific and modern archiving facilities. So they have been going around the country and trying to retrieve as much of the original documents, books, everything of value of Bapu. And till now, none of the organizations had that sense of archiving and preserving and all that. So, a lot of these organizations, if you go to them, they'll have almiras lying in the corner of a locked up room, or boxes or trunks just lying stacked up, and nobody knows what is there, and it's all gathering dust. So these people made it into a practice of going, the team of Gandhi Research Foundation made it a practice of going to such institutions which have been there from Bapu's lifetime and searching for things. And so on one of the trips to Kasturba Trust in Indore, while rummaging through their, what in our Bombaya terms we call bhangar, they opened a trunk and they found this diary gathering dust in it. And everybody said, this trunk has never been opened. It's just lying over there. It's all, nobody's bothered about it. And they said, let's check what all the other things are in there. Somebody put it in the trunk. So they must have thought about it a bit. And when they brought it to Jalgaon and somebody who knew Gujarati started reading it, he realized that this was somebody's personal diary. And on reading it further and correlating the dates mentioned in that and all that, it was soon identified as, the writer was soon identified as that being Kasturba. And that's when they came to know about it. I am associated with the Gandhi Research Foundation. I'm on the board of directors over there. So I heard about it, and like everybody else, I shrugged it off and I said, no, that's not possible. Ba couldn't write. How could there be a diary written by her? And but then the curiosity got better of me, and I go to Jalgaon quite often on to attend meetings and for research work and all that. So on one of my trips, I asked Uday, who works at the Gandhi Research Foundation, I said, I've heard you have Ba's diary. He said, yes, of course we have Ba's diary. So I said, okay, then can I see it? Still disbelieving the whole thing. And he said, but you see, we did the preservation process and all that, and we sent the diary back to the Gandhi Kasturba Trust in Indore because it's, after all, their treasure. But we've digitized the whole thing. So I have the digital copies of the diary. So I said, please let me see those, and he brought out a few images of the pages, and I started to read those few pages, and it was strange, Ashraf, because I started with disbelief, not believing that Kasturba could have written it. And after the first page, first few lines, I actually started hearing as if she was speaking to me through those diaries. It was a very emotional thing, and I said, I'm not getting up. I want to read every page of this diary. And they brought up the whole diary, the digitized versions, and I was sitting there reading, tears streaming down my cheeks, because it was a very emotional kind of bonding, because I had never thought that I would be able to read firsthand what Ba had written. And I remember the whole scene over there. I'm reading from a computer screen, tears streaming down my eyes, and everybody sitting around is also getting emotional. And that's when I made up my mind. I said, I've got to transcribe this, because we must put it up in a manner that the world can read Ba. For the first time, the world is going to get an opportunity to read Ba firsthand, not somebody else's impression about her, not somebody else's memory about her. Herself, she herself speaking through her words.
And from 90 years ago, it must have been something. There's this book lying in a trunk for 90 years unopened. Yeah, you're right. I think the words you used were national treasure. I absolutely agree.
And, Ashraf, the thing was that everybody who heard about it, the first response was disbelief. Nobody was willing to believe that Ba could have written a diary. And here I am reading it, and it's also, the words are also sort of taunting me. You never bothered. You never bothered to find out. I spoke through these words, and you never bothered. None of you did.
I want to, Tushar, touch upon something that you said during some earlier, which was that Kasturba was thought to be unlettered. So how were you so sure that was her diary? Because this is handwritten. This is not a computerized or a sort of an audio recording.
Yeah. Ashraf, it was very clear within the first few pages of the diary. It was very clear that this was written by somebody who was not a trained writer, who did not have the vocabulary, who did not have the disciplined training of education. This was somebody who was just putting down thoughts as they came in her mind, in the same undisciplined manner. Many a times, if you read the book and if you see the pages over there, you will notice she describes a function that she has done during that day, because it's basically the majority of the pages are what she has done during that day. She'll start the page saying, got up at 4, gargled, washed my face, did some prayers, went back to sleep. And it's that disjointed, that disjointed and things. Nobody with a rudimentary education would write in that manner. The other was, the writing was all conversational language, colloquial conversational language, as if she was talking to somebody. And that's where the words rang so true, that it felt as if Ba was speaking. It left no doubt in my mind that it could be anybody else but her writing it, because anyone else writing on her behalf would have tried to make up for the inability of or the lack of the vocabulary, the lack of being able to describe things in a better illustrative manner and things. And yet, with this frugality of words, you can actually see a picture of her life on that particular day, what she was doing and things. And so the doubts for me vanished very fast.
Right. I remember when we were recording the earlier series earlier this year, like I said, we had spoken about this. There's very little information about whether Ba was educated, and you had said that, look, we don't know for sure, but it's quite certain that she was wise to the ways of the world, even if she was not educated. So I think here we have some proof, at least, that she had some basic education. Tell me, Tushar, were there any doubters even within your family that the diary was authentic?
Yes, there were. When I told my father about it, he said, "No, no, it can't be. Ba didn't know how to write. She couldn't write at all." And I said, "No, Dad. If you look at the pages, you will also agree with me." I think the same thing is going to happen with him also. And I think everybody, this, you see, the thing is, Ashraf, that the book is no great literary achievement. There will be people saying, why did you have to even publish this book? It's what is it in there? But it is a revelation of a woman who has always been doubted and neglected. And even today, I was told, he said, okay, we agree that it's her diary, but we don't agree that she has written it. And she most probably has dictated the diary, and somebody else has written it on her behalf. And I refuse to believe it, because anybody else who had a better knowledge of the language, if they were transcript just writing what Ba was saying, would have corrected the language, would have corrected the grammar, would have written in a different style. Over here, if you read the pages, Ashraf, you will notice there's no writing style. Sometimes there are long sentences, sometimes the whole sentence is compressed into two words. So the other times, foreign words, like, in a couple of places or more, she writes about her interactions with the superintendent of the jail she is imprisoned in. And in one place, she'll call him Suprin. On the other place, she'll call him Superintend. Then some other place, she'll write the whole word, Superintendent. So, it's written the way she comprehended those alien words. Now, hospital is ispital, it's istipal, it's hospital. All these combinations of words can only be written by somebody who's writing them as they perceive them phonetically, and is not aware of the spellings or anything. And somebody else who, if they are transcribing it, they would definitely correct them. And so I have absolutely no doubt. And people, they can raise questions. It's very nice if people will raise questions on this. It will give me an opportunity to answer and refute their. After reading this diary, I realized that we were not being fair in doubting Ba all these years. And I'm not going to doubt her abilities any longer.
Yeah, I think you were eloquent about that when we did the earlier series too. That she was not just somebody's shadow; she was a sort of a very strong and mature and wise person in her own right. So, coming back to the diary, Tushar, what were some of the notable things written in it?
One of the very astute comments that she has mentioned in it is just before Bapu Rai voicing concern about his his program for upliftment and emancipation of the Dalits had become moribund. It wasn't progressing the way he wanted. And for some reason, on one of the pages, I don't remember the page number, Ba ends, she talks about how Bapu has announced a fast for on this question. And she ends that page with a sentence in Gujarati saying, Potana anuyayiyo પરથી ઉઠી ગયેલો બાપુનો વિશ્વાસ. In English, it means this is Bapu losing faith for his disciples. And it's pertaining to the program of the emancipation of Harijans. So she was aware of these.
And sorry to interrupt, but and this insight could only have come from somebody who was this close to Bapu, right?
Yes, somebody who knew Bapu, who knew what he wanted and what he expected, and somebody who also was aware of the situation nationally, not just one dimensional understanding of her life partner, but the situation in on her surroundings, duplicity by some of the associates and followers and things. And she wasn't averse to mentioning that. At another place, she talks about, they are in Pune, and she talks about Pandit Nehru coming to visit Bapu on some important political matter and having very intense discussions with Bapu, consultations with Bapu over a period of 4 days. And Ba writes that I am enjoying this. I sit where they are talking and listen to everything they talk. And I am absolutely enjoying their discussions. Now, unless she realized what it was, unless she realized the import of all that, it wasn't as if there were two people sitting and gossiping about society. There were very uh, important deliberations happening about the future of the struggle and the country and everything. And she is sitting over there and she says, I am enjoying this. I hope it doesn't end too soon. So there is a political sense to the woman also.
Yeah, yeah. Why do you think Kasturba wrote the diary in the first place? Do you think it was her way of communicating with a husband who was separated from her for long periods of time?
Yes, she started writing the diary when he is in Dandi or he has been arrested for after the assault satyagraha. And she is at Sabarmati Ashram, and she is taking on the leadership role by traveling through the district around Sabarmati and the neighboring districts, and campaigning for Swadeshi and prohibition and khadi and all that. And that is when she starts writing. The first page is from them, but the very first entry in the diary is Mara Sashtang Dandavat Swikarjo, meaning please accept my obeisance. And that is only when you do write it to some elder respected person, or at those times the position a husband was given. And so I think my interpretation is that she's pining for her husband, the companionship of her husband. And she decides, okay, if I can't be with him, at least I'll write down my daily routines and chores. And so whenever we meet again, maybe he can read and catch up with it. But I also feel that she never gave him the diary to read, because if Bapu had read that diary, he would have corrected all her mistakes on that. So I think she wrote it and she said, no, I'm keeping it for myself. Maybe after some time, maybe somebody will discover it.
What's the tone of the diary? Affectionate, neutral, angry?
Affectionate, neutral, that of an observer when she is talking about the situation and the events happening around her. Somebody who is, in the background observing everything, but very matter of fact. No glamorization. She said, on many pages, she said, I have nothing else to do and I'm bored writing the same old things. But the very next page, she's sitting down and writing the same old things all over again. And so it also feels to me like she's confirming to, because Bapu had made it a practice for all ashram inmates to maintain a daily diary. Everybody was told that you have to write a diary. And I think Bai was obeying that diktat in his absence, because when he was present, she never bothered to sit and write it. But in his absence, this was her way of admitting that she missed him so much that she was even willing to take up a pen and start writing a diary the way he would have wanted her to do.
And how does she refer to Mahatma Gandhi? Is it words of longing or encouragement or everything in, everything in between?
Uh, well, the direct reference is Bapu. She calls him Bapu or Bapuji, as everybody else is doing. But you can feel that tone of intimacy, that tone of concern. Every time she has heard that he's started a fast, she's very concerned. At one point of time, she's locked up in Sabarmati Ashram, where she gets the news that he's starting his fast in Pune, in prison. And she says, "Oh, I am of such ill luck that look at it. While he is over there almost putting his life on the line, I can't be with him." She said, "I must be the most unlucky person on this earth that I can't." And then she writes a letter to him and says, she sends a telegram to him and says, I want to be with you. Please make arrangements to so that I can be with you. And he writes back and he says, "No, we cannot ask the government for such favors. You don't have to be concerned about me. Whatever happens, you have to live on," kind of thing. And she said, "Look, I can't even go and be with by his side." So there is that intimacy, there's that longing, there is that acknowledgement of an unnatural separation from her husband. I mean, separation not in the sense that these days we take that word, but of being away from one another,
Yeah,
forced,
I think when we talked at
a
length
forced.
about that in the earlier series too, we talked about the amount of time that they spent away from each other simply because Bapu was leading first the struggle in South Africa, then he came here and took over leadership of the Indian freedom struggle, and then both were in jail at different points of time. It's quite remarkable the amount of time that they spent apart. Through the diary, Tushar, what is the picture that emerges of Kasturba, the woman, the mother, the satyagrahi? I know it's a very short period, but
Yeah.
I'm sure it kind of
But it's a very important
brings that forward.
period, and it's a period when she is not living in the shadow of Bapu, because there were two personalities. One personality is what we get to see in the diary, where she's on her own most of the time, and she's writing about her own days without Bapu in the background or along with her. And so you get a picture of a person with strength of character. You get that, you see that even in prison she is molding the routine to resemble as much as the ashram routine. And at one place she writes that, because there's nothing to do and they've locked us all up, and there was a outbreak of illness amongst the inmates, most of them being women inmates from the ashram. She said, I've started taking care of her, all of them. But then she writes that, the morale is sinking, and that's a dangerous thing. I don't want their morale to sink. So she said, I have started all the daily routines of the ashram in the prison to make them feel as if we are still in an ashram, we are not locked up in a prison. And she does that on her own. So you also see a person who is taking responsibility for a whole group of persons and seeing to their welfare to the best of her abilities.
One more proof, in fact, of her leadership qualities and everything that we mentioned earlier.
Right. Because the best leader is the one who can normalize a situation which is unnatural, isn't it? Which is something that can be a burden on anybody's psyche. And imprisonment, although the satyagrahis were given B and C class facilities in the prison, we can't even imagine how much deprived those B and C classes meant. And to live over there would have a great psychological effect on a person. And understanding that and realizing that we need to do something to distract them out of that mental condition means that you have a great sense of perception, and you think you are responsible for the well-being of your colleagues.
Absolutely. What is your favorite passage from the book?
She describes how she is allowed to go to Pune. Bapu is going to be released from Yarwada prison. Ba is still serving her sentence in Sabarmati prison, and she's released on parole from the prison to be able to go to Pune to be with, welcome him. And she describes how they've reached the prison gates before Bapu comes out. And she said, oh, there he comes out, and I see him. But this time, the prison sentence has taken a toll on his health. He's become very weak, frail. I'm concerned. But she said, હું રોઈ નહીં. બાપુને જોઈને હું રોઈ નહીં. On seeing Bapu, I did not cry. I didn't want to sadden him, so I controlled my emotions. To me, that was the most intimate admission of the bond that existed between the husband and wife, my ancestors.
Absolutely. And Tushar, this reminds me of something that you had told me earlier, which is when a similar situation, but the roles were reversed. Kasturba had been imprisoned, and Bapu had gone to receive her when she was being released. And if memory serves, this was in South Africa. And when he saw her come out, he said something similar, that she had changed completely. The prison had taken an immense toll on her, and he realized that she was a different person altogether from the one that went in. It's quite uncanny how similar the two tales are, but the roles are reversed.
Yeah. Juxtapositioning positioning the two incidents, one from Foxhurst in South Africa and one in Pune, in Johannesburg, where the roles are reversed. In in Pietermaritzburg, Bapu is waiting to welcome Ba out of prison, and here Ba is waiting to welcome Bapu out of prison. But the reactions and responses are almost the same. Bapu over there was concerned and very anxious about the condition he finds his bride in, because uh, it is mentioned that she had aged beyond her years at that time. The prison stint had taken such a toll on her physically. And here she is also saying that Bapu looks very frail and weak from his stint in the prison, and I'm concerned about it, but I did not cry. Whereas I imagine that in at the incident in South Africa, although Bapu was very strong and his picture is that of an unemotional kind of cold person who wouldn't have any outward show of emotions, I I believe that he would have greeted Kastur with tears in his eyes, seeing what had happened, how severe a toll it had taken on her.
I tend to agree. I think from time to time we do find Gandhi talking about the toll, his own attitude towards life, and the choices he made by diving into different struggles, the kind of toll that took on his family. I think he's talked about that from time to time. Uh, Tushar, where is that diary now? And also, could you tell us how it is being preserved?
Well, all the chemical treatments and things were done so that the deterioration could be stalled, and the diary be maintained in a better manner. It's given back to Kasturba Trust in Indore, and I'm hoping that they would have realized its import now and are preserving it much better than the way it was there. We're very fortunate because generally, when I have also seen this, that things are kept in such a careless manner. I itself, when I was doing research and I went into archival records, I only found crumbled dust of the papers. Nobody had even bothered to see the condition of what they were claiming to be preserving. So I only hope that the Kasturba Trust now realizes how important that diary is and is maintaining it. The only solace is that now we have a digital copy that will never deteriorate. And it's in multiple places. So at least a digital copy will be preserved. And I'm sure now that it has been realized, the Kasturba Trust also will make sure that it is properly preserved and maintained. And I hope they decide to display it for people. I myself, Ashraf, I myself have never seen the original. I have never touched it, and that's one of my ambitions to hold that diary in my hand.
Do you think it should be transferred to the Gandhi Museum in Delhi?
It would be very good if it was transferred to any of the museums in India, so that more people would be able to see it and experience it. But I think that since it has been in the possession of the Kasturba Trust in Indore, uh, if they do a proper display of it and things, that would also be very good. But I hope now they are more aware and more responsible of preserving it.
I know that you have worked hard to ensure that Kasturba is no longer the forgotten woman. So, what went through your mind as you first chanced upon the diary? I know it was a digital copy, it wasn't the original, but still, when the pages were sort of popped up on the computer screen in front of you, what went through your mind?
Ashraf, it was very surreal because as I read that diary, it's been my life's regret that I never was able to sit at their feet in their ashrams, live with them in the ashrams, and learn from them directly. And when I was reading this diary, it sort of felt to me as if I was sitting next to Ba in her kutir in Sevagram ashram or at Hriday Kunj in Sabarmati ashram, and having a conversation. She was talking to me as a child, telling me what she had done and how things were happening. I could actually feel that way. I think it was an emotional response to the experience that I was uh, passing through while reading that diary. And, at one point of time, it was also my conscience biting me, saying, you never bothered to give this woman her dues for so long. And all that together created a kind of a very emotional feeling for me. And even now, when I was actually, I had the pages on my laptop, the same laptop I'm talking to you, and I was writing, transcribing the whole thing and writing the translation and all that. I kept feeling as if Ba was looking over me to ensure that I didn't fiddle with what she had written. I didn't try to polish it up and things. It was a big dilemma, Ashraf, especially when I started doing the English translations. The first instinct was to polish it all up, correct it, and write in a nice language.
Very much something that Bapu would have done, like you described, which you feared.
Yes, yes, yeah. And then I realized, I said, no, I am not an author. I'm not the author of this diary. If I'm going to reproduce this diary and translate it, the reader who does not read Gujarati must also get the same sense that I got of Kasturba while reading Gujarati in writing English. And it was very funny, Ashraf, that when I submitted the manuscript to the publisher and the editor got her hands on it, she sent it back and says, "What sort of language have you written? How can we accept this?" And she started correcting the whole thing. And I said, no, this is Kasturba's language. We have to keep it that way. And they said, they were very concerned that how could HarperCollins publish a book that had such atrocious English in it. So if you've seen the book, there is an author's note in the beginning where I've explained why the English is that atrocious. Because I believed that it was my responsibility to let Kasturba also speak to the reader in English and me to become just the medium that was transferring the whole thing, the experience to the readers. And so I'm sure if an English professor reads my translation, he or she would, fail me if they were my examiners.
Tushar, when you were certain that the diary was authentic and you went ahead with the publication, what was the reaction within the family? And tell us specifically about the youngest generation. How did they react?
Well, my daughter Kasturi, who's named after Ba, was very fascinated by the whole thing. And so was my son Vivan. And judging from their reaction, I think they were happy that they were discovering an ancestor outside the shadow of that iconic, huge, shadow that Bapu cast, even which extended right up to their generation also. So I think it was very refreshing an experience for them to find a normal ancestor, a ancestor they could even believe. Yeah.
I won't ask you whether they find you normal or not, but I know what you're saying.
Let's not even go into that. Let's not even go into that, Ashraf.
You already authored an extraordinary book on Gandhi's killing. Let's Kill Gandhi, a chronicle of his last days, the conspiracy, murder, investigation, trials, and the Kapoor Commission. Now you've authored Kasturba's diary, or I should say, translated Kasturba's diary. What's next for you?
A very ambitious project, Ashraf. I want to do a dramatized biography of Ba, where life story will be authentic, but I want to write in the Dalrymple style of history writing, where it's all brought alive with conversations and dialogues and things. I've tried it a little bit in this, and I got a bit of flack also for that, because I imagined dialogues between Bapu and Ba in certain incidents, which I was writing in Ba's this thing, and somebody in the family who's a brilliant historian, professor of history, has ticked me off saying, "How dare you do that?"
I suspect I know who you're talking about, but you would go there.
But I'm going to go ahead and try and do it.
Yeah. I think they call it historical fiction nowadays, don't they?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Histofiction or dramatized history, one of the two.
Dramatized history.
I'm
Yeah.
very wary of this histofiction because there's a whole unsavory project about fictionalized history being made into history. So I don't want to call it histofiction, but dramatized history.
Dramatized history is much better. I agree with you. And that conversation about fiction being passed off as history, I think, is another podcast, is another episode, or maybe several episodes. So we'll get there eventually. But I also want to know something very, very important from the listener's point of view. If any of them want to know more about Gandhi and Kasturba, how do they go about it? So we have Google, of course, but how would we actually, really get into the guts of the subject and have a real feel of the kind of people they were and what impact they had?
Unfortunately, for Ba, there is not much available, because even those people who have written biographies of Ba, and my parents being in English the only ones who wrote a very extensive biography of Ba. If you read it, you get a sense that they are writing about Mrs. Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi rather than Kastur Kapadia Gandhi, as I like to now refer to her. But I also realized, because I was part of their research when the attempt was being made to research about Ba and things, and I know how it was impossible to find anything independently about Ba. Even her parents and her siblings, you only know about them when it is something related to Bapu. So you know about Ba's parents only because they are Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi's parents-in-law, and you don't get anything further. So it's so shocking, but their passing away is also not recorded. Suddenly, you discover that when Ba comes back from South Africa, half a family is dead. Her parents are no more. So they just sort of get erased out of the pages. And so it's going to be very, very difficult. I remember my mother going to Rajkot, going to Porbandar to try and find things, some record about them. And you must remember this, Ashraf, that although Bapu's father was the prime minister or diwan of the principality of his grandfather was a diwan of Porbandar. Briefly, his father was also a diwan of Porbandar. Then he shifted to Rajkot, became a diwan over there. They had politically very important titles and things. But monetarily, Kasturba's father was a much more wealthy. When I say much more, he was fabulously wealthy at that time. Just imagine, he was the merchant prince of Porbandar. In Gujarati, they used to call them Nagar Sheth, the richest man of a merchant of that city or the principality. And he had ships that sailed and traded all around the border, the sea coast of India, and right down to South Africa on the sea coast of Central Asia, and then down East Africa, right up to South Africa. And his company, his Pedi, as it was called in Gujarati, used to issue promissory notes to traders and merchants traveling abroad, where on that note, on in any of the ports of call, they could encash those notes for money readily. So his esteem and his wealth was at that level. He even had interest in textile mills in Mumbai. But that rich a man, that important a man in the life, being the father of Kasturba, he's just a name that we know of and nothing else at all. And so it's very, very difficult to actually flesh out the skeleton of Kasturba's biography.
Tushan, I know you're a descendant of Mohandas and Kasturba Gandhi, but your passion to keep Gandhi relevant in today's India goes well beyond that. It's not just about family. And now I should say your passion to keep Gandhi and Kasturba relevant. So here's the question I ask all my guests at the end of the show. Why do you do this work?
It's a debt I owe, Ashraf. My legacy has provided me with a lot of advantages all my life. Not monetary advantages, but advantages that matter, the esteem that it has brought me. I don't deserve that esteem. I don't deserve that respect on my own. It's because of whose descendant I am that I've got all those privileges and the honor and the respect and all that. And I very honestly believe that I owe a debt to that legacy. And I have to confirm it. There was a period in my life when I didn't want to do, they didn't even want to acknowledge the legacy. I said, I am my own person and I'm going to live my own life. But I've realized over the time, I've realized that there is a responsibility, there is a duty. And I'm no longer averse to doing it. And especially on realizing in the past 30 years, the drift, the dangerous drift that India has been in, I've realized that if I want to pass on the nation that I inherited to the next generation, I have to be much more active and much more radical in my actions. And that is where I think if you want to just put it in without all the glamour and gloss of everything, it's for my own survival and for the survival of the India I love and cherish.
Tushar, as always, it's been a privilege to have you on the show. I've said it endless times before, but I'll say it again. Your work is important, and I urge all listeners to read your books and articles, to listen to your talks. They're available on YouTube, and to take the time to understand and assimilate the views of Gandhi and Kasturba so that this country can transform into what they imagined it should be.
Thank you so very much, Ashraf. It's always been a pleasure to talk with you, and thank you for giving me this opportunity to speak my mind and my heart. Thank you so much, and thank you to all your listeners, the listeners of All Indians Matter. We all matter. That's why the country matters. Thank you.
Thank you all for listening. Please visit allindiansmatter.in, that's ALLINDIANSMATTER.in for more columns and audio podcasts. You can follow me on Twitter at Ashraf Engineer, that's ASHRAFENGINER, and All Indians Count, that's ALLINDIANSCOUNT. Search for the All Indians Matter page on Facebook. On Instagram, the handle is All Indians Matter. Email me at editor@allindiansmatter.in. Catch you again soon.